Hi everyone and welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris. Today we're joined by one of Holland's most successful producers. He has been behind over 300 hit records. He's decided lately to get out from behind the mixing console and get behind the decks. He's now part of Nicky Romero's Protocol family and we're very honoured to have him here in Sonic Academy. Please welcome John Christensen. John, are you there?
Yes, I am.
How are you?
Yeah, very good at the moment. Thank you.
You're sitting in a very, very beautiful studio. This is your own place, is that correct?
Yeah, this is.
Tell me a little bit about this. You've been running this studio for how long?
For almost 15 years now.
15 years. And what do you call the studio?
It's the White Villa Studios.
White Villa Studios. Let's go back to the early days. You are very, very musical. You collected gear from a young age. You went to the Dutch Academy of Music and studied piano, is that correct?
Yeah, pianos and drums.
Pianos and drums. And you're a jazz pianist?
Yes, I am.
You are? Okay.
That's what they basically learn you there. If you do the piano lessons, they teach you with the jazz music.
Okay. So did you have a love of jazz music?
Well, basically, I really love all the theoretical things that comes with the jazz music. I think if you really understand the jazz music, you can almost play all other kinds of music as well.
So you also started collecting gear. What really sparked? I think from a 12-year-old, you had a real interest in analog gear. What sparked that interest?
Well, basically, it was just the sound of it. But all of that started with my father because he was a producer as well, and I joined him to his studio sessions. And back in the days, they only had analog stuff with the analog 24-track machines and the analog mixing consoles and the Fairchild compressors and everything. And the sound was so pure. When a violin was playing in front of a Neumann microphone and being recorded at the 24-track tape, yeah, it still sounded like a violin. And later, when all the digital stuff came in, a violin does no longer sound like a violin because it was translated to ones and zeros in a digital domain, and you really lost the emotion that the sound has. So back to the question, it's really the emotion and the pureness of the sound.
So are you talking about the zeros and ones converting to digital? Are you talking about samples or the actual recordings, the early digital recordings?
Both. Samples, that's a real other question because samples is nice, but they never play like real instruments. How good the samples are. Mm-hmm. But basically it's also about the sound because the translation just converts the sounds into something. It's yeah, I don't know how to explain it. But
you're the owner of they're quite famous studios, the White Villa in Holland, and you've owned that for probably 15 years. How, with a lot of studios closing across the world and everybody, everything going in the box and becoming so cheap, how have you managed to keep ahead of the game and keep the thing going?
Well, the concept of the studio was different right from its start because normally when you have studios like this with the big mixing consoles and everything, it's just a facility you could rent with a technician and that's it. And I've changed the technician into a producer. So an artist can come here and just finish a real recording with just one person who writes, who produces, who engineers and everything in just one person. So we can offer a better price because we don't need 5 persons. And we all work in smaller studios with just good equipment. And that's basically the different concept. And that's why I think we can survive.
So if I'm an artist and I come to your studio, you can co-write with me, you can produce, you can take as a one-stop shop basically, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we did for a long time. Now the things are changing a bit because I decided to DJ myself as well. But well, we do that.
What's the key piece of gear in the studio? What's the desk he's sitting at?
It's my pride. It's the SSL Duality.
All right, and do you find in dance music records does it make a big difference?
Yeah. Just like I told you earlier, it's about a bit of emotion, a bit of how you feel the music, and I can enhance that using the analog mixing console. You can go further.
Does everything end up going through the SSL, or do you sometimes go fully in the box?
I sometimes go fully in the box, but then most of the time, just before I have to deliver the master, I just still go on mixing on the SSL.
Is there something inside you go? It just has to go through the SSL, just and wired through, just for your own sake, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is here, so I can use it 24 hours a day. So why not? And it sounds better.
Surely you're the one of the best people to ask. I mean, you've probably got the LA2 compressor, you've got Fairchild, you've got all the actual gear there, the real gear. Yeah. How do you feel the Waves and more specifically the UAD plugins are stacking up against the analog? And sort of for people who haven't really had a chance to get their hands on this real analog stuff, give us an insight into the differences of the characteristics.
Well, I really think it's great what they have managed to accomplish with the plugins. Mm-hmm. But it's not the real deal. But one thing that the plugins have as an advantage above the analog gear is that it's totally recallable. Yeah. You can save the settings in a song and just change the songs a few times a day if you want. That's the problem in this kind of studios. I can make a recall on the desk, but if I bring up a project, it costs me about half an hour to get my settings back.
Right.
But in terms of sound, I would always go for the real deal.
And how do you recall those settings? Do you have printouts of the knobs and you tick them off and keep a record of the settings that way? Or how do you recall sort of the analog gear settings?
Most of the time when I'm pretty sure about the settings, I re-record the processed information.
Right.
So in Pro Tools, then I have, for instance, it's a compression. I have a dynamic track and a compressed track. Okay. So when I recall Pro Tools, it's still there. But if I want to change the settings, I really have to go back in finding new settings. But I never make photos or anything from them, because when I want to change them, I want to change them. So I don't need the settings anymore. I'm going to find some new settings.
So when you get a really nice compressor and vocal chain, you print the vocals off and you print off then an effects channel as well?
Yeah.
With the explosion of EDM, have you seen the studio getting busier and more people wanting to book in and get into and working in the studio?
Yeah, back in the days it was the studio was fully booked by singers. Nowadays there are more DJs coming in because they know what we do and what sound we can achieve. Mm-hmm. So that's what they're coming in for.
What other producers have you got in the complex, and do you have other producers renting sort of writing rooms or small studios in the complex?
Well, basically, the most famous guy who was working here for 4 years was Nicky Romero.
Sorry, who's Nicky Romero? How about we haven't?
Well, he's #7 DJ of the world, you know.
We also made a plug-in with him, didn't we?
Yeah, of course. I know. I use them.
Yeah.
We have this studio.
Yep.
And when I look to the left, I see the window. The singing booth is behind it. And behind that booth, there was Nicky's studio. So we actually shared one vocal booth. And he was here for 4 years.
Okay.
And he made the biggest records in his career so far in this studio.
And do you have any other producers in the area, in the complex now, producing things that are really interesting, really vibey stuff?
Yeah, but I cannot tell you all the names because sometimes it is ghost producing, and then I'm the ghost.
Right. Well, let's. It's a really hot topic at the moment. Let's have a chat about ghost producing. I mean, you're probably from a traditional recording background where the producer did sit in the studio and they directed the musicians. It's kind of changed nowadays, where ghost producing is a DJ would come in and get a producer to make every note in that song. Where do you stand in the whole ghost producing thing?
Well, I'm really pretty much against it, to be honest.
Right.
Although I'm ghost producing myself, but of course I did that because I have to pay my bills as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But besides that, I think the DJing part of it is becoming easier because of all the pioneer stuff with you beat mixing. The things are just doing it themselves.
Yes.
So
you have sync buttons.
Yeah, because of that. So you have to have something special to really have that big career. And I think it should be that you can produce and write your own songs. And I think all the DJs who has these ghost producers are just marketing products. It's all about money. And I think DJing and producing, it should be about passion. And for me, that is passion. So that's why I make my own stuff, because I want to make my own stuff. It has to have my signature.
But it's hard to define as well, because rock bands have producers.
Yeah.
But the rock bands tend to play the instruments and have, create, the bass player and the drummer will get the groove going. The singer brings a certain element. But in EDM, a DJ walks in, plays a record, and say, "Can you make me sound like that?" Do you think it will inevitably be a short career because they don't know how to develop and become an artist?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. It's going to be a short-term thing because you are not able to develop in your sound. You always are depending on someone else who has the sound, and so it's not inside you. And I think eventually the fans will know as well when you are or are not producing your own stuff.
Again, you're always going to be behind the curve because you're always bringing records in that are big, and you're always going, let me sound like that. You're never going to invent or forge the new sound, the new direction.
Sorry, can you?
You're always going to be producing records that are out. You're never going to be ahead of the game because you're not developing and forging a new sound. If you know what I mean, you're not creating new avenues for your sound to go down. If that makes any sense, you're probably not understanding me correctly. Let's move on. What piece of gear in the studio has made the most difference to you, apart from a DAW and your computer?
I think basically it was the moment when we installed this mixing console. I always used to work on analog mixers, but I could never afford one like this. So also cheaper analog mixing consoles can sound very bad, although it's analog. So when this one came in, I thought everything was bigger. I thought someone just moved the studio speakers wider because my stereo image was bigger, and well, we can go deeper and higher, and everything was more.
Right.
So that made the biggest difference.
Do you get a lot more separation? I remember years ago we worked on a Mackie Digital 8 bus, and by the time I brought up 4 or 5 faders, the whole mix just started collapsing. Whereas if you work on SSL or Neve, you get so much separation. Do you find that with your SSL duality?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can even EQ too much bass on a sound, and it still sounds separate from the rest.
Cool. So you've been behind countless releases and, I think 300 odd hit records. What made you decide to step out from behind the console and go out as John Christian yourself as an artist?
Well, it really is an inner feeling. So I was producing for other guys, and I really hated myself someday for that.
Right.
So that was the point where I said, no, I'm not longer going to do that.
Right.
I want to produce for myself because I really have a specific idea about what my sound is. I don't want to sell it. I just want to connect it to myself. So that really moved me into DJing.
And what sort of artists that really inspired you? What was what sort of dance artists that you thought, I'd love to sound like these guys? They're really blowing my mind.
Well, to be honest, it was basically Nicky who really blew my mind because I got the chance to see him build his own career from just 5 meters distance.
Yeah, okay.
So I saw every aspect, also the downside and also the success and the fun and everything, and that really got me into it.
And what sort of, for people starting out, we're a site that's known for getting people started in producing and teaching them producing, and they all sometimes don't realize what is the downside. What downsides have you found in the industry?
Well, it's the pressure to come up with even better ideas than the last record. You have to really reinvent yourself and every time. And that's sometimes hard when you're just touring and you don't have the time to go into the studio, and then you just have 4 or 5 hours to fix a new track, and you cannot do it, but you have to. That's really a downside of it.
Cool. Let's get on to your new single, Next Level. You're sitting in the Beatport top 10 in the progressive house genre, I think it is. It is a massive, massive hooky record. How long did that take to write?
Yeah, it takes a long time because I'm really into every detail of the production. So I think nowadays with the EDM music, writing and producing is somehow just one thing.
Yeah.
And so go on and change the sound, change compression, change melodies. That's what just going on for days here. I think it was 4 days of just tweaking everything to get it like it is right now.
I think that's one thing that's probably young producers maybe miss. I mean, it is a real long slog to get that extra 10%.
Yeah.
Let's get back to, how do you start a track? First of all, what DAW do you use? What is it, Pro Tools or Ableton, or what DAW do you use?
I work in a combination of Pro Tools and Logic.
Logic, okay.
Logic, I do all the arrangement and all the sound designing things, and in eventually it goes to Pro Tools in audio files.
Okay.
Then I just split them out on the console.
So do you export all the stems from Logic, import all the stems into Pro Tools, and mix down there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes it are groups, because hi-hats and everything, yeah, well, it has no use to give them a separate channel on the SSL. So I make a loops and percussion bus, for instance.
And what is the John go-to synth then? What's the synth that you always open up to get your big sound going?
Well, nowadays it's again the silent.
Right.
Because of all those, there are just a few banks who have all the hits record sounds in it, and I just start from there, basically. It saves a lot of time.
And drum-wise, what do you? I know obviously you're using Sonic Academy and Nicky Romero's kick. What do you use loops for percussion, or you open up EXS 24s or Ultra Beats? How are you programming your percussion?
I use them all.
Use just whatever's handy.
I try to make my own loops. Sometimes by just cutting some sounds from different loops and then got that into a new loop. I hate really just finding a Vengeance loop, put it in the production, and that's it. Okay. I think that's not good enough then,
right?
Because everybody could have done that. So, but sometimes I do get the Vengeance loops, but then use 5 or 6 loops, and then cut out all the things I like about the loops, and then cut it into a new one.
And would you ever use sampled sounds to and map them across an EXS24? Is it always soft synth that you're doing, or do you use any synths outside the box? Like, would you have any Moogs around the studio, or any sort of classic synths that way?
Sometimes I use the Moogs. I go to Nicky Romero's studio and then borrow his Moog, because I have a really good one.
Cool.
But I must admit that working inside the box is going on. It's developing, and I really got into it the last years. Back in the days, I would really never have used a plugin, but I do.
But I think, I mean, especially in the last 2, possibly 3 years, there's been such advancements in the component modeling of the UAD plugins and Waves plugins that, you know, to be able to open up an SSL channel across all your channels is you know, pretty hard to ignore when you're a young producer and you can't afford the £20,000 desk. Do you use Waves or do you use UAD stuff?
I use UAD stuff, and sometimes in combination with the real stuff. Sometimes I just use a compressor from inside the box because I really want to do some automation with it, and then to make the sound better, I use a physical TubeTech EQ or so.
Okay, so you're always trying to add some sort of analog-y outboard bit into it to try and warm it up. Let's get on to the hook of Next Level. It's it really drills into your brain.
Yeah.
Does that come from the jazz, being able to play jazz and understanding music, or how am I gonna? It doesn't sound like a jazz thing, but you've really captured that EDM hook. How did you get that hook going?
I think it's basically also about the sound, and I really pushed it to two channels on the SSL desk because it has this screaming midfield, and I think that's basically why it just goes so deep.
Yeah.
Because of the EQ of the SSL, and in terms of jazz music, I think if you listen to the chords I played in the break, there comes some jazzy kind of stuff.
Cool. Let's move on to your track you did with Nicky, Still the Same Man.
Yeah.
It's a very different sound palette than the normal EDM stuff. Was that intentional, or how did that come about?
We were in the studio here together with Nielsen also, who was the other guy who collabed on that to that track.
Yeah.
And we were just basically loving the sample of Still the Same Man. So it was the same man.
Can I ask where's the sample from?
It was Till West. So it was an earlier release, I think about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And we got that sample, and we just were having a fun night. And we just got into the studio and let's see what's happening. Never intended to have that released. So it was just a fun night in the studio. And then this came out.
It's definitely got a sort of Justice-y type simian mobile disco type feel to it. Was that intentional?
No, everything just happened.
It was just one of those records that just came together and
just get well, if you do this, we can also do that, and if you do that, we can also do this, and then a few hours later there was the track.
And has that changed a lot, that track? I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things. Is that been your biggest hit to date in terms of your being your own artist?
In terms of notation on Beatport, it is, because it was in the top 10 for weeks. In terms of what you see on internet, it's my remix of Still the Same Man, which has 3 million views on SoundCloud. I think it's almost 4 million now.
Let's go over to your remix, and I've seen some videos online of you doing Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Was that something that you were just toying about with in the studio, or has this come from the record company? How did the remix come about?
Well, like I told you, I studied pianos and I studied drums, and since I've done that, I always was a big fan of Stevie. He has this album, Songs in the Key of Life. And sometimes in my free time, I just play drums with that album on a headphone and just play along with it.
Yeah.
And there was also this song, Superstition.
Yeah.
And one colleague of mine, a German studio owner, has this multi-track with the 16 tracks, which were the original recording of Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
So he gave that to me, and so then I was able to work with all the separate parts and also the vocal. But it was about, I think, 100 BPM or so, 104. So I have to cut it in Melodyne and changed it to 128, and then find some new chords to it, and then I made that remix.
I mean, that is a classic song and a classic vocal. Do you get nervous when you're approaching something like that, or do you find it really interesting and exciting?
It is really interesting and exciting. I really took a risk sometimes when I remixed Tiësto's Flight 643, because basically it was his breakthrough record.
Yep.
And some people say you should never touch some records like that. But I did, and I presented it to Tiësto, and then he said, wow, this is amazing. Why not releasing it as a solo track of yourself? I said, wow, why not as a remix of you? Just Tiësto, Flight 643, John Christian remix. Oh man, it's too good for that. It has to be a solo release.
Bizarrely, I was going to ask you about that, because when I was looking at it, I saw on Spotify it was your name and it wasn't your remix. I was kind of going, but they to me, I played that record out loads. It sounded like the original parts. Did you have the original parts, or was it recreated?
Nope. There were no original parts available, and at the moment I started the track, Tiësto wasn't aware of I'm doing that, because I just wanted to see if it really works out before I just present it to some guy like Tiësto. So I really remake the all of it.
It's like the organs. Is that from a Roland Alpha Juno? Is it that sort of stabby organ sound?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I mixed it with a preset of the Massive.
Okay, no problem.
If you just compare the tracks, you hear the difference, but it really sounds like it.
Let's get on to you've got a big studio and stuff. The one area that we always like to talk about is your mastering chain, your sort of what do you put over your output of all your mixes then?
Basically, I do that with hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can see it here, it's all those white stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Behind me, and it's Weiss.
It's what? Weiss?
Weiss. That's the name of the
manufacturer.
The manufacturer.
And what is it? Multi-band compression or limiters or what are they?
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can see it.
Underneath the lowest machine is the Phoenix from Thermionic Culture. That's an analog compressor, tube compressor.
Right.
That's what comes first. After that, you have the what was it? Crane Song. Sorry.
Crane Song, yeah.
Crane Song Ibis EQ. Very, very good EQ. You can how can you say that? You can tune your EQ.
Yeah.
Like a G is 48 hertz. And you can say it's not 48, but it's a G over there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's in tune what you are EQing.
Yeah.
That's a good trick for having a loud master, to have everything in tune, even hi-hats. And then it goes to the thing above.
Yeah.
It's a AD converter, because all of it is analog, and then it goes back to digital.
Digital, yes.
The Weiss stuff is digital.
Mm-hmm.
And there I have dynamic EQ, which is the same as a multi-band compressor, but we can also say it's a dynamic EQ. And then comes the limiter.
Cool.
And it works on 3 channels, so it comes in stereo, and then it makes left, medium, mid, and right.
Right. Okay. So you have your MS going on there, and for those that can't afford all that lovely sweet gear, if you were mixing in the box, what would be your go-to sort of plugins over the mix bus?
When I do a mastering, just to show a demo or whatever, do that in the box because that's easier. Mm-hmm. I always use what do I use? The C4 from Waves, which is a dynamic equalizer or a multi-band compressor, just like and after that comes the S1, which is a stereo spreader. Yeah. I always use stereo spreader. And I put that on before I start mixing. So I got used to a wider stereo image. And then comes the max volume from Waves as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's not developed for using it as an end limiting plugin, but it works fine as a limiter. Right, and it just sits on top. So it's just those 3 plugins then, the sort of multi-band compressor, stereo imager, the S1, and max volume, is it max? Yeah, max volume, yeah. And that's it? Is that all you put over? And that's it. And what synths inspire you? What apart from Silence? So I take it you're obviously using still Logic 9 because Silence is 32-bit. What other synths do you have in your arsenal that you think? Is there any secret synth in there that we don't know about? No, I don't know. I don't think so, because I really take the basic stuff and then make the sounds myself, starting from presets. And I really think the Massive is great for that. So the majority of the stuff coming from your studio would be Silent and Massive. Would that be correct? Yeah, that's correct. And how do you approach sound design? Do you think of a sound in your head and go and make it, or do you sit and tweak parameters and find, oh, that's kind of inspiring and interesting? How do you approach those problems? The way I work is always that I made the whole idea already before I start producing. So I really got what I want in my head. And then I'm just going to find a way to achieve that. So if I want to sound like, for instance, the Next Level track, I really have that in my head, and then I just going through presets. Oh wow, this comes close, and then start to tweak it.
It's definitely something I would do. I'd kind of have a sound in my head, go to the preset area and get in the area. It just saves so much time, and then go and tweak that preset, you know, rather than starting from a saw every time, you know. So it kind of, you've moved again from the studio to into producing and also DJing. How are you finding that connection with the audience, that immediate sort of standing in front of them?
Oh well, basically, it really attracted me for a long time. I joined Nicky for a long time, just as a visitor. So I've seen all the big stages, but then from aside the DJ booth and saw him play, and I really got inspired what he was doing. And I always got fascinated from my early days about what house music can do to an audience. And when you are in the studio, you are just imagining what a track could do in an audience. And now I'm just performing it in front of an audience. So for me, that makes the circle round.
And your sound, how does it translate both sides of the Atlantic? Does it work better in America than it does in Europe, or is it better in Asia, or how is it in Australia? Talk us through all the sort of territories that you've been to and how it works.
Well, America is great because they really dig new music.
Yeah,
I've played on the protocol party of Nicky Romero in Miami last year in the Ultra Week, and then I just played 1 hour of only new music. There were no hits on that moment, and it was just the biggest party ever. I think you could never do that in Holland, for instance. Here you have to play very commercial, and around Holland, Germany, France, you have to play commercial. But in America, you can just do your thing.
And is it more the traditional trance sound happening in Holland rather than that more the American EDM sound, or what's the hot sound in Holland at the moment?
Well, if you really want to please your audience, you have to take the #1 top 40 hit in an EDM kind of remix and then play that.
Okay,
so or just the vocal.
So it's gone very, you know, top charts, just EDM remixes of chart hits. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, that's happening. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what's next for John Christian? Where do you see yourself in the next year? What's the plan? Is there an album coming, or more music and more touring, or
more music and more touring? I don't think I have the status for doing an album at the moment, but maybe in the future there will. But now I have a really lot of new tracks coming up. We have signed a few tracks to really cool labels. Next Level is the first one of the series on Protocol. Next month there is a collaboration coming with Oliver de la Rosa and Shermanology on wall recordings, and after that there are 5 more releases planned already. So singles coming up.
Cool. And what about, have you any festivals coming up over the summer, or what's planned DJ wise? Any tours of North America?
Well, we are planning a tour in Asia at the moment, 12 days, and doing some festivals in the Netherlands. I also made an anthem for Dreamfields Festival, which is one of the biggest here, and I play main stage over there. And also going to play more on the Protocol events. They are doing the Protocol Takeover. I've played them a few in Miami and in Las Vegas, but now they're doing it also in Europe. So a lot of gigs coming up.
Cool. It's a nice way to start your DJing career with starting on the Protocol tours. You're not having to do the crap bars up and down the motorways and small venues where nobody turns up. You're going straight in at the top level. John, we want to thank you very much for joining us on Sonic Academy today. It's been a real interesting insight into your world. And I just, you know, thank you very much for taking time out to show us your desk and your gear.
Okay, that's great, man.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Bye.